Hello and welcome. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. We have a packed show for you with all the top stories from around the globe. Let's get started with our big focus, which is on the US elections. Is the United States set to witness a Trump-Biden rematch come November? From the looks of it, this could very well become a reality, much to the chagrin of 70% of Americans going by recent polls. Days after winning the Iowa caucuses by a historic margin, former President Donald Trump has taken another huge step towards winning a third consecutive Republican presidential nomination after winning the New Hampshire primary in a one-on-one matchup with his last challenger standing, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. For her part, Haley has vowed to remain in the Republican race, saying she'll now focus on the 24th February primary in her home state of South Carolina. But history is not on her side. In modern presidential campaign history, no non-incumbent has won the Iowa caucuses and New Hampshire primary without going on to win their party's nomination. Trump seethed over Haley's decision to continue her campaign, saying she had to win. She failed badly. In what were expected to be celebratory remarks on Tuesday night in New Hampshire, Trump instead sounded annoyed that Haley had not yet dropped out of the Republican primary race. He mocked her, calling her an imposter who had claimed victory despite doing very poorly. His remarks made it clear that Haley's attacks on Trump's age, his many faux pas, and Republican losses during his time as the party's leader have frustrated the former president. It was a jarring contrast from Trump's election night remarks just 8 days ago in Iowa, when he praised his rivals as very smart, very capable people and predicted that Republicans were going to come together soon. This time, Trump even invited two former GOP contenders, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, to attack Haley on stage. Haley insists she won't quit the race. She told her supporters, "New Hampshire is first in the nation, it's not the last in the nation. This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go." It's not clear, though, where Haley could actually notch a victory against Trump. She isn't participating in the Nevada caucuses on the 8th of February, and polls in her home state of South Carolina, where the 24th February primary will be the next major showdown, show Trump with a huge lead. Haley is likely to face immense pressure to depart the race in the coming days. She'll face questions about whether she will follow a path similar to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who vowed to continue after his second place finish in last week's Iowa caucuses, and then he dropped out days later. Haley's campaign says it is placing $4 million in television advertising reservations in South Carolina. She also has scheduled a rally in North Charleston. Haley used her Tuesday night speech to make her most pointed argument yet about electability, blaming Trump for Republicans' disappointing performances in the 2018 and 2022 midterms and the 2020 presidential election. She said, with Donald Trump, Republicans have lost almost every competitive election. The worst kept secret in politics is how badly the Democrats want to run against Donald Trump. The former South Carolina governor called Trump the only Republican in the country who Joe Biden can defeat. She also highlighted their ages. Trump will be 78 on election day in November. Biden will be 81. She also questioned Trump's mental competence and challenged him to debate her. Remember, Trump skipped all 5 Republican primary debates and has shown no indication that he would consider participating in one. Trump is dominating Republican primary polls. However, the polls also show that Haley outperforms Trump in a hypothetical general election matchup with Biden, something that Haley has frequently pointed out. She said the first party to retire its 80-year-old candidate is going to be the party that wins this election, and I think it should be the Republicans that win this election. So our fight is not over because we have a country to save. While Trump continues to be the Republican frontrunner, there are some potential signs of trouble for Trump, with moderate voters going by some New Hampshire exit polls. 44% of the primary electorate said Trump is not fit for the presidency if he's convicted of a crime, and Haley won 84% of those voters. Haley won 79% of the votes of those who said Biden legitimately won the 2020 election, showing a potentially limited appetite amongst voters for Trump's claims about widespread election fraud. As Haley seeks to prove that she remains a viable contender, President Joe Biden began preparations for a general election rematch with Trump, dispatching senior White House staffers to work on his campaign and holding an event in Virginia where he hammered Trump on abortion rights and signaled his intent to make abortion rights a central focus of the general election. He said, "Let there be no mistake, the person most responsible for taking away this freedom in America is Donald Trump." Biden won the Democratic New Hampshire primary on Tuesday, but he had been at risk for blowback in New Hampshire after he led the Democratic push to demote the state in the party's nominating process, elevating South Carolina's primary to become the first contest with delegates on the line. The Democratic National Committee had called the vote meaningless and urged presidential candidates to take all steps possible not to participate. But Biden's allies launched a low-key effort to get Democrats to write in Biden, and it paid off with an easy win. Biden's path to the Democratic nomination for a second term seems to be clear. However, as Biden attacked Donald Trump over the key election issue of abortion rights, pro-Palestinian protesters tried to disrupt his speech, shouting, "Genocide Joe has to go." They interrupted him at least 10 times during the rally in Virginia, his first campaign event of 2024. Protesters have disrupted previous Biden events as well over his support for Israel during its military offensive in Gaza.
She won. She didn't win. She lost. And, you know, last week we had a little bit of a problem. And if you remember, Ron was very upset because she ran up and she pretended she won Iowa. And I looked around. I said, "Didn't she come in third?" Yeah, she came in third. And then I looked at the polls. She was talking about most winnability, who's going to win, and I had one put up. I don't know if you see it, but I have one put up. We've won almost every single poll in the last 3 months against crooked Joe Biden, almost every poll. And she doesn't win those polls. And she doesn't win those. This is not your typical victory speech, but let's not have somebody take a victory when she had a very bad night. She had a very bad night. You know, we won New Hampshire 3 times now, three. We win it every time. We win the primary, we win the generals, we've won it, and it's a very, very special place to me. It's very important.
They're falling all over themselves, saying this race is over. It's not over! Well, I have news for all of them. New Hampshire is first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation. This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go. And the next one is my sweet state of South Carolina. I am going to spend every single day proving to you that you made the right decision. God bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
What we saw tonight is America first defeating America last. That's what we saw tonight.
All right, so is the US all set to witness a Trump-Biden rematch come November? That is the question we're asking on Global Lens tonight. Joining me on the show, Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, former Indian diplomat, Professor Swaran Singh at the Center for International Politics at JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and Irina Sukuman, National Security and Geopolitical Analyst, joining us from New York. Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, let me start with you. First, Donald Trump wins the Iowa caucuses by a historic margin, picking up 50% of the vote, something that no candidate had ever managed before. Now he's romped home in New Hampshire. Nikki Haley is going to be under tremendous pressure now to drop out of the race, even though she has vowed to continue. The question is, do you believe that barring some extraordinary, unforeseen circumstances, it is almost certain that 5th November 2024 will witness a Trump-Biden rematch? And interestingly, A vast majority of Americans have said that is something they do not wish to see. Your thoughts?
No, I think Neha, you are absolutely right. I must compliment you for doing a very good introductory commentary before this program started.
Thank you.
And you have highlighted the important issues. You have highlighted what has happened so far. So there we are. I mean, Trump's victory in New Hampshire is not unexpected. I mean, he is most popular among the Republicans. But there are so many things going against him. All these criminal cases are going against him. There are divisions within the party. Many of his party people don't want him. At least some of them don't want him, particularly in high positions such as governors and so on. And similarly, on the Democratic side also, there is certain skepticism about President Joe Biden, whether he will be able to win the next round and so on. So people are not too happy about by President Biden either. So as you rightly said, I mean, we have a situation where both parties are unhappy with these two people. Many people are unhappy with these two people. But yet, as if the fate has ordained, it looks as if these may ultimately be the party nominees. And of course, Nikki Haley wants to continue for some more time. She wants to see what sort of results she gets in South Carolina and a few other states before giving up. She has some advantages to her side, but I don't think she has the required political support within the party.
That is how it looks increasingly at the moment. Professor Swaran Singh, let me come to you. Now, you know, Nikki Haley has repeatedly made the argument that Donald Trump was singularly responsible for all the electoral losses that the Republicans have seen in recent years. She blamed him for the 2018 losses, the 2022 midterm losses, the 2020 presidential election, of course, which the Democrats won. Another point that she makes repeatedly is that they're almost the same age. Donald Trump is going to be 78 on election day, as we mentioned. Joe Biden is going to be 81, and she says whichever party throws out the 80-year-old candidate first is going to be the winning party. But it doesn't look like any of these arguments are working in favor of Nikki Haley at the moment. She may be betting on South Carolina, her home state, where the next primary is scheduled to be held on the 24th of February. But many are asking, will she even last in the race that long?
I think despite all the flip-flop and his style of speaking, Donald Trump in most surveys is being shown as even more popular than President Joe Biden, who's a sitting president right now. So there is little doubt that at least for the GOP, the grand old party, it's very likely that former President Donald Trump will be the candidate again. But I think the message that comes out of from Hampshire primary is that Nikki Haley is not a candidate to be ruled out very quickly. She has tremendously improved, 20 points improvement in percentage points of reaching about 39% of votes. Though we also see that Donald Trump continues to be above 50% votes, which is interesting because in Iowa, when you had these caucuses, which is a very open style voting with, so voice vote and raising of hands. And in that case, sometimes the bully behavior of a candidate can influence the way voting happens. But here in the primary, you had secret ballot voting. And again, Donald Trump has crossed 50%, which is showing that he's clearly a very strong candidate. But Nikki Haley is going to continue because, as I said, from Iowa to Hampshire, she's shown enormous improvement. And next state, as she keeps saying, is South Carolina, where she was the governor. And she has hoped to further reduce the margin of voting that comes to her and voting that comes to Donald Trump. Her supporters are believing that she might actually cross in South Carolina, and then set the mood in a very different direction. But I think what is interesting is that her basic point that she wants to make is, as she says, these two candidates, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump, she believes are both fossilized plus people, and therefore they are not the leaders who should actually lead America, in making America great again. That definitely has some plus point. Plus, she's a woman candidate, and that again carries a certain, niche supporters that she has over a period of time built for herself. But as of now, it seems for the grand old party, for the Republicans, Donald Trump is right now appears to be a clear winner as a nominee for the party. As far as President Joe Biden is concerned, usually if the sitting president has announced his candidature, he will be the candidate sitting, and some confusion was created because there was also talk of Democratic primary in Hampshire, which is simply because they had passed a law that they will be the first to hold primaries in the country. But Democratic Party, given the fact that they are looking at the kind of demographic make of each of these states, they are trying to opt for more mixed states to be the first states to hold primaries. But Hampshire has decided to go ahead. So there's even a confusion whether they will put President Joe Biden's name among the candidates or will not put. Joe Biden would not like his name to be there because he believes Democratic primaries will begin in different states. But as of now, apparently it looks like it will be between Joe Biden and President Donald Trump.
Right.
And that is what we see as of now. And that is a signal that has come out of Hampshire primary as well.
Clearly, well, it is creditable how far Nikki Haley has come in this contest. There's no doubt about that. But she will have to pull a rabbit out of a hat if she has to go any further than this in this contest. At the moment, it does look like it's going to be a Trump-Biden rematch. I need to take a quick break here on the show. On the other side, we're going to look closely at what a Trump-Biden rematch could mean for the US and the world.
वर्ष 2070 तक भारत नेट जीरो का लक्ष्य हासिल करेगा.
There is certainly a wall of capital coming into the clean tech, climate tech space, not just in India but across the world.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we are talking about the US elections. All right, Irina Sukuman, let me come to you now. What are you picking up? Does it now look like Trump, Biden? It will be, it's going to be 2020 all over again in November 2024. And Nikki Haley herself pointed out while campaigning that according to polls, 70% of Americans do not want to witness a rematch between these two candidates. But it looks like it's almost an inevitability now.
Well, there are two things working against Haley right now. First, Ron DeSantis dropping out essentially gave most of his votes and support to Donald Trump, which can account for the change in New Hampshire, where Nikki Haley was leading slightly right before that happened. The other issue is perception. What Haley said is accurate. Donald Trump supported failed candidates. He's not popular with the wider public in general elections. The turnout is likely to be very low. All of these things are true, but that doesn't change the fact that Trump has successfully made himself look like the legitimate president with those of his, with most of the Republican Party, who are now turning out in droves to support him. That he has delegitimized her. He attacked her credibility and portrayed her as a creature of the swamp, as somebody who is backed by, who is receiving backing from Democrats, and as someone who does not have a record of political success against him. And finally, her biggest problem is the fact that she simply has not provided enough positive reasons of why people should vote specifically for her as opposed to Donald Trump. She has attacked why he has failed, she has attacked his record correctly, but she has not made her own record enough of an argument in this election. And, some people would say that it wouldn't make any difference, that it's all about emotions, that Trump has successfully pushed forward a victimhood narrative, that he has been wronged, and that's the only thing that is driving his supporters. To some extent, it's true, but to some extent, they are very much buying into rhetoric, into his political rhetoric on the economy, on his successes as president, on the foreign policy. And Nikki Haley is being seen as someone who is backing failed paradigms that Donald Trump's supporters are now discarding. He's put Trump and his circles of support invested greatly into influencing public opinion within the party on various foreign policy issues. We may disagree with how that has shaped the public opinion. We can say that it's all terrible, but Nikki Haley simply does not have that sort of reach.
Okay, so let me go back to Ambassador Yogesh Gupta. Ambassador Gupta, let's say it is going to be Trump versus Biden come the 5th of November. How do you think the cards stack up as far as the two leaders are concerned? On the one hand, you have former President Donald Trump, who seems to enjoy tremendous support amongst the Republicans, who's challenged conventional wisdom time and again. He keeps making history with every new electoral win of his. But at the same time, we know about how much legal trouble he's in, the number of legal cases that he faces. He's twice impeached. On the other hand, you have a sitting president whose approval ratings have not been particularly impressive in recent times, whose age and forgetfulness are matters of concern even for the Democrats, whose policies on immigration, for instance, are not very popular, who's got criticism over his handling of inflation, and who is also in the line of fire for his unqualified support to Israel over its war with Hamas. Given all these factors, who do you think has the edge?
Well, Neha, you have rightly said that Trump has his share of troubles, particularly the legal troubles. And the hope of President Biden and others is that if Trump is somehow incapacitated from running in the election by some provisions, by some Supreme Court directives or by some Supreme Court decisions that could come to their help, or some criminal cases which have been filed against Trump, if some judgment could come out, against Trump, which could help President Biden and others, that is another hope. But barring those legal issues which are stacked against Donald Trump, the record of President Biden, particularly on the domestic side, has not been very convincing. People are unhappy about his handling of the economy because many people, particularly middle class and lower middle class, they think that they haven't received much benefits from his handling of the economy. Their incomes have been stagnating. Their standards of living have been more or less the same as earlier. Similarly, there is a view that that Biden has mishandled the issue of immigration. He has allowed a lot of illegal immigrants to enter into the United States for no particular good reason, and that has added to the crime and so on. So there is a certain amount of unhappiness. Then, of course, there are foreign policy issues like Israel's war against Hamas, which again are not very popular among sections of immigrants in the United States. So there are all these issues against President Biden. While Trump may not be exactly popular among many people, but they think that Trump is firm on the domestic issues. Trump is firm against illegal immigrants. Trump is firm against ensuring that jobs don't go out, jobs come first to the United States, industries come back to the United States, the economic standards of the Americans improve, America first is America first theory. So all that goes very well with voters at home compared to the policies of President Biden. So in that sense, I think President Trump is definitely a favorite, and personal characteristics of his age and how he kind of falls into sleep occasionally, all those things have not gone out well in favor of President Biden. So all those issues are there. While there is only a difference of 3 years between Trump and President Biden, the fact is that Trump looks much more younger, much more energetic, much more ebullient and so on. And Biden looks more sleepy, as some people say that.
Sleepy Joe is what they call him.
Yeah, and his policies have not really helped many people.
Okay, all right. Interesting analysis that. I need to slip into another quick break. We will continue this discussion on the other side. Stay with us.
वर्ष 2070 तक भारत नेट जीरो का लक्ष्य हासिल करेगा.
There is certainly a wall of capital coming into the clean tech, climate tech space, not just in India but across the world.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
A defiant performance by Ten Hag's men. Now standing at 7 feet 4 inches, Satnam Singh is making his way into professional wrestling.
We are getting more good news for India.
Currently, the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. Basically, the US markets has slowed down because of high inflation.
So obviously, diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
That lab-grown diamonds are not mined, and they do away with the entire mining. So they save up on all the environmental damage that is associated with mining, and of course, the mining cost, which is why they're even more affordable.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry, right? But I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Bangalore traffic is an example of something that has gone wrong with our system.
We have more than 50 flyovers in Bangalore city. If flyover is a solution to traffic problem, Bangalore should not have traffic problem.
According to TomTom Traffic Index 2022, Bangalore is ranked as the second worst city in the world when it comes to traffic.
The speed limit at the ORR is 80 kilometers per hour, but our vehicle has only moved 10 kilometers per hour.
What Bangalore needs is a surgery, but what we have been offered repeatedly are band-aids.
Only on the world's first news OTT. News9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. We're discussing the US presidential elections, which may still be months away, but it increasingly looks like it's going to be a Trump versus Biden contest. All right, let me go across to Professor Swaran Singh at this point. Professor Swaran Singh, looking at a hypothetical Trump-Biden rematch. You know, in the earlier segment, we listed the many challenges that the two candidates face. Trump's multiple cases, legal cases, versus the unpopularity of Biden's policies and concerns about his age. Who, according to you, has the advantage in that contest?
I think, Neha, it's a difficult guess to hazard here because 5th of November is still far away. Several things could possibly change between now and November. But if I have to look at what would be the kind of comparison between two candidates, if the candidates are Donald Trump and Joe Biden, frankly speaking, Joe Biden, you remember, have ensured a lot of redeeming of normal life and economy in the United States that was hit during the pandemic under watch of President Donald Trump. Employment is better. In that sense, he's been less rhetorical, more firm on China, particularly on semiconductors. There's a talk of reindustrialization of Midwest now in United States. But apparently on foreign policy, on the global leadership, Trump keeps repeatedly saying, we have really lost it, and therefore he wants to make America great again, become a strong leader, which world fears, as he says. And on that, his view had already been that US should not get entangled in Ukraine. And we saw the enthusiasm that Biden administration showed both on Ukraine war and much more on the war against Hamas that Israel is even now fighting. He was so early to go into the theater and announce things in favor of Israel. His Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, has been shuttling very often. I think Defense Secretary Austin Lloyd went twice. Indeed, let me say, Austin Lloyd in April of the Ukraine war, April of 2020, had set up a 50 nations coalition to support Ukraine. US is not even able to organize their meeting. Pentagon doesn't have funds to support that. Congress is finding it so difficult to support Joe Biden's package for Ukraine or Israel. So on foreign policy, I think President Trump will have enormous leeway to really sort of showcase President Biden as a not very effective leader. And that's what he wants to underline. Basically, as I'm saying at this stage, many polls are showing that even now he is apparently more popular than sitting President Joe Biden. So in perception of voters, as if the polls are correct, he is emerging as a very powerful candidate. But we also know there are large number of cases against him. What will happen to those cases, we don't know as of now. But talking as of now, as of today, I think it will be not a very difficult contest in case the kind of trends continue as they are now. If they continue till 5th of November, then I think it will be a relatively easy decision for voters to make, easy fight, where President Trump seems to be really pushing ahead his own popularity, his own agenda, his own ideas. And his great advantage is he has very niche, large number of very strong sort of supporters who listen to no logic. I mean, Trump even today believes he did not lose election in 2020, and there's a large number of his supporters
who actually believe that. And the strange thing is that for many of them, it is still President Trump as though he were the sitting president, as though he never lost the 2020 election. And that, in a bizarre way, seems to work as an advantage for Donald Trump. Of course, you're right in pointing that out. And also Professor Swaran Singh, very interestingly, sticking his neck out and saying, if it indeed is Trump versus Biden, Trump could romp home. It's likely to be a rather easy decision for the voters. Irina Sukuman, your thoughts on what Professor Swaran Singh is saying? He is, in a sense, suggesting the Democrats need to really worry. Not only are many of President Biden's policies unpopular, there are growing concerns about his age, but if you look at most of the polls, Trump is leading Biden in almost all of them.
It's funny, but the media has ironically played up Trump a great deal, and they made it seem like he has a very broad base of support which has been growing, but it's not. It's actually the opposite. He has lost a lot of support. The fact that Nikki Haley is still running despite seeming lack of path to presidency at this point is actually a sign that he does not really have support among independents. Ironically, it's not just the fact that Biden is an incumbent with all the relevant institutions in his favor. It's actually the Republican Congress, members of Congress, that are doing Donald Trump a poor favor, not because they are divided, not because they disagree with Biden on various issues, but because they are seen as obstructionists for the sake of obstruction, not as problem solvers, not as people willing to offer something reasonable in exchange for greater advantage for the country. And it's quite possible that the Republicans will lose Congress and not just the White House come November because of the way they position themselves. Moreover, despite the fact that Trump has a record that many people find favorable compared to Joe Biden's economic and foreign policy issues, his recent statements are very disturbing to many people. His recent comments around Taiwan play to some portion of his base who think that Taiwan is challenging American jobs or who are isolationist, but most Americans do not support these positions. They also do not support his general isolationism, whether on Ukraine or on anything else, and they are extremely concerned about his second term in office, which, based on his remarks...
If many Americans are concerned about isolationism, but I can tell you many Americans are also extremely concerned about Biden's support for Israel's war in Gaza. So, since I'm out of time, Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, I will give you the last word. If Biden does end up losing this election, he will count among a handful of American presidents who had just one term in office. Currently, of course, Trump is in that category. But if Trump indeed is ahead of Biden in this contest, and we still have several months to go before this election, what kind of damage control, according to you, does the Democratic Party need to do?
Well, I think they have to really work heavily on the domestic agenda, because this America of 2024 is very different from the America of earlier years. There are a lot of people here in the middle class and the lower middle class who are left out of the economic benefits. There are people, there is a lot of increase in crime because of entry of so many immigrants, particularly illegal immigrants. And people think that, the America has been spending too much on Ukraine, too much on Israel, foreign policy issues. Foreign policy issues do not necessarily win elections. They are good to highlight the popularity of the incumbent president. But particularly when the situation is tough at home, the foreign policy issues don't win you elections, So I think the Democratic Party has to really work hard on highlighting what President Biden has been able to do, particularly for the middle class and the lower middle class, particularly for the workers at the lowest level, how his presidency has helped them, what new ideas he has got to help them in case he comes back into power, in case he gets his second term. I think there is a big sort of gap that he needs to cover. And I think President Biden knows this, but I don't know whether he'll be able to come up with, the required measures to sort of be able to enlist the support of these sections.
Right. Well, 10 months to go before the elections. A lot can happen in 10 months, but can President Biden close the gap with Trump? That remains the million-dollar question. This is, of course, a story we'll continue to track closely here on Global Lens. On that note, Irina Sukuman, Ambassador Yogesh Gupta and Professor Swarn Singh, thanks for joining me on the show tonight. All right, let's now turn our attention from the US elections to the Russia-Ukraine war. A Russian military plane with 74 people on board crashed in the Belgorod region of Russia near the Ukrainian border today. The region's governor said all those on board were killed. The cause of the crash is not yet clear, and there are conflicting accounts about who or what was on board. Russian state media has reported that 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war were on the plane and being flown to Belgorod ahead of a prisoner swap. But Ukraine's military says the plane was carrying air defense missiles. Kiev has claimed that the Il-76 that crashed was carrying missiles for the S-300 air defense system. The plane that crashed, as we said, an Il-76, is a Soviet-era long-range freighter plane that has been in service since 1975. It typically operates with a 7-person flight crew and can carry around a 50-ton payload. These aircraft are not designed as passenger aircraft. The plane crashed about 5 to 6 kilometers from the village of Yablanovo in the Koroka district of Russia's Belgorod region. The Belgorod governor, Vyacheslav Gladkov, has said a Russian investigative team and emergency services personnel are at the scene of the plane crash. The Ukrainian government agency that looks after prisoners of war says it's investigating claims that a Russian military plane that crashed was indeed carrying Ukrainian servicemen ahead of a prisoner exchange. A statement issued by Kiev simply says Russia is trying to destabilize the Ukrainian society. Now, the region of Belgorod has been increasingly drawn into Russia's war on Ukraine, with an increasingly emboldened Kiev launching cross-border strikes on its cities and towns in an effort to dent domestic support for Moscow's invasion. Earlier this month, Russia was forced to evacuate residents from the region after a series of retaliatory strikes from Ukraine. Just last month, strikes killed at least 25 people in one of the deadliest single incidents for Russian civilians. And as we said, in today's crash, all 74 on board are believed to have been killed.
Approximately at 11 o'clock in the area of Belgorod City Airport, an Il-76 aircraft of the Russian Aerospace Forces crashed. On board was 65 former Ukrainian Armed Forces servicemen, prisoners of war, who were being transported for exchange. There was another Il-76 that was following it, with about 80 more prisoners of war on board. It managed to turn around. The Ukrainian leadership knew perfectly well about the upcoming exchange. They were informed about how the prisoners would be transported. But the Il-76 aircraft was shot down by 3 missiles from an anti-aircraft missile system, either Patriot or Iris-T of German manufacture. Specialists will figure it out later when they directly inspect the crash site.
The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Let's now get you the latest on the Israel-Hamas war. A new report suggests that Israel and Hamas may have broadly agreed in principle that an exchange of Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners could take place during a month-long ceasefire. However, the framework plan is being held up by the differences between the two sides over how to bring a permanent end to the Gaza war. Intense mediation efforts led by Qatar, Washington and Egypt in recent weeks have focused on a phased approach to release different categories of Israeli hostages, starting with civilians and ending with soldiers, in return for a break in hostilities, the release of Palestinian prisoners and more humanitarian aid to Gaza. More than 100 hostages are still being held by Hamas in Gaza. While Israel has sought to negotiate one stage at a time, reports say Hamas is seeking a package deal that includes a permanent ceasefire before hostages are released during the initial phase itself. One offer by Israel is to end the war if Hamas removes 6 senior leaders from Gaza. Hamas has completely rejected that proposal, according to sources. White House spokesperson John Kirby has said the U.S. Middle East envoy Brett McGurk is in Cairo and would travel to the region for active discussions on ensuring the release of hostages and securing a humanitarian pause in the fighting in Gaza. Meanwhile, reports also suggest that the mood of the Israeli public seems to be shifting after more than 100 days of war in the Gaza Strip, and the catalyst is a rift over the polarizing leadership of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Some Israelis reportedly want an election right away, as the death toll amongst Israeli soldiers keeps rising and over 100 hostages still remain in Gaza, and Hamas is still standing. More Israelis are vocally pushing back against Netanyahu and his far-right government. The public is also increasingly divided over whether the military can simultaneously achieve Netanyahu's stated goals of destroying Hamas and freeing all the hostages. Opponents say the Prime Minister lacks a clear vision for how to get Israel out of Gaza. They believe political and personal motivations are clouding his decision-making. On Monday, Israel's military suffered its deadliest day in over 3 months of conflict as 24 soldiers were killed in 2 incidents, bringing the Israeli military death toll in Gaza since late October to 220. Also, there's growing anger around the world over Netanyahu's rejection of Palestinian statehood. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said last week's clear and repeated rejection of the two-state solution at the highest levels of the Israeli government is unacceptable. This refusal and the denial of the right to statehood to the Palestinian people would indefinitely prolong a conflict that has become a major threat to global peace and security. Such an outcome would exacerbate polarization and embolden extremists everywhere. Guterres has called for the universal recognition of the right of the Palestinian people to build their own fully independent state. Netanyahu has drawn global condemnation in recent days and defied even his closest ally, the United States, which provides Israel with billions of dollars in military aid, by rejecting calls for a Palestinian state.
Yesterday was one of the hardest days since the war broke out. We lost 24 of our best sons, the heroes who fell defending the homeland. Together with the citizens of Israel, I grieve for each and every one of them. I hug the families whose world has changed forever. From here, we send a prayer for the peace of our wounded. The IDF is conducting a thorough examination of the disaster. We must learn the lessons and do everything for the peace of our soldiers. The difficult news we had received yesterday about the death of 24 of our fighters, our best sons, from all over the country, north and south, from all places, is a heavy blow. We share and express deep sorrow and heavy grief in the mourning of the families. This morning, our hearts are broken in the face of the fallen and the families, and our hearts are complete in the important task for which they fell, and which remains before us to fulfill, to ensure the safety of the State of Israel, the safety of our children, and our future in this place.
Israel's military operations have spread massive destruction and killed civilians on a scale unprecedented during my time as Secretary General, including more than 150 members of our own staff, following the horrific terror attacks by Hamas on 7 October. This is heartbreaking and utterly unacceptable. The Middle East is a tinderbox. We must do all we can to prevent conflict igniting across the region. And that starts with an immediate humanitarian ceasefire to relieve the suffering in Gaza, allow humanitarian aid to reach everyone in need, and facilitate the release of hostages, which should be immediate and unconditional.
Our next story on Global Lens tonight is on the growing tensions between North and South Korea. North Korea has demolished a monument that symbolized hope for reconciliation with the South, days after the regime's leader Kim Jong-un said the peaceful reunification of the two Koreas was no longer possible. In the latest signs of rising tensions on the peninsula, the Arch of Reunification, built in 2000 after a landmark inter-Korean summit, has disappeared from satellite imagery. It's not immediately clear whether or how it was taken down. Kim, whose tone has become markedly belligerent in recent weeks, described the concrete arch, which shows two women, one each from the north and the south, holding an emblem of the outline of the Korean peninsula, as an eyesore. This while he was making a speech this month to the Supreme People's Assembly, the North's rubber stamp parliament. He added that North Korea's constitution should be amended to reflect South Korea's new status as his country's principal enemy, effectively ending decades of official policy that stressed the eventual reunification of the autocratic North with the democratic South. The 30-meter arch, formerly known as the Monument to the Three Charters for National Reunification, symbolized self-reliance, peace and national cooperation, according to South Korean government records. Located on Reunification Highway, which connects Pyongyang to the heavily armed border with the South, it was reportedly erected to commemorate plans for reunification put forward by Kim's grandfather and North Korean founder, Kim Il-sung. While purely symbolic, its reported removal will add to fears that North Korea has taken a more provocative course in its ties with the South and its allies months before the US presidential elections. The regime claimed it had launched its first spy satellite in November and last week said it had test-fired a new ballistic missile tipped with a hypersonic maneuverable warhead. On Wednesday, South Korea's military said the North had launched several cruise missiles into the sea a fortnight after it fired artillery rounds near the country's disputed maritime border. The North has used missile launches to protest joint military exercises by South Korean and US forces, which the regime considers a rehearsal, for an invasion. All right, let's now get you a story that is going viral on the social media, and it is about the Oscars. The nominations for the 96th Academy Awards have been announced, and guess what? While Ken has been nominated, Barbie has been snubbed by the Academy. Ryan Gosling has been nominated for Best Supporting Actor for his portrayal of Ken, but Margot Robbie, who plays the titular character, found no mention in the Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress category. What's more, Greta Gerwig is not amongst the 5 Best Director nominees for this year's Oscars, and this has come as one of the biggest Oscar shocks in recent memory. And remember, this is a movie which pretty much, like Oppenheimer, set the global box office on fire, brought the audiences back to the theatres after the long COVID-induced lull, and sparked conversations about feminism around the world. Understandably, many are unhappy with the Academy's decision. Even Ryan Gosling, while expressing his surprise and disappointment, said, "There is no Ken without Barbie."
And now for our final category.
With the Oscar nominations revealed, some big names failed to make the cut.
Hi, Barbie!
Hi, Ken! Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie, the women who helped make Barbie a runaway success, were left out of the directing and lead actress categories. And Leonardo DiCaprio, who played the lead in Killers of the Flower Moon, was passed over by Hollywood's Film Academy for lead actor. While both films snagged 2 of the 10 Best Picture nominations, entertainment reporter Liz Trenier said the snubs are notable.
The conversation around Barbie is obviously Margot Robbie did not get the nomination, Greta Gerwig did not get the nomination, Dua Lipa did not get the nomination. However, America Ferrera did, and we'll also be seeing Ryan Gosling perform I'm Just Ken on that Oscar stage.
Barbie snagged 8 nominations in total, including Gerwig for Best Adapted Screenplay. But while the film came out on top in the summer box office, it is rival Oppenheimer that racked up more Oscar nominations. The epic film about the race to build the first atomic bomb landed 13 nods, including Best Picture.
About what's happening here.
Cillian Murphy, who plays the titular role, is also in the running for lead actor.
It's Oppenheimer. Everybody's singing for Oppenheimer. It's the most nominated film this year, which is no surprise.
Also left out, Penelope Cruz for her supporting role in the high-speed racing drama Ferrari. Bradley Cooper was left off the Best Director list for Maestro, though he was nominated for Best Actor.
Oh, Miss Seeley!
And among the overlooked films, The Color Purple received only one nomination. The winners are chosen by the roughly 11,000 actors, producers, directors, and film craftspeople who make up the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. More women and people of color were added following the #OscarsSoWhite uproars of 2015 and 2016. Talk show host Jimmy Kimmel will return as host of the Oscars ceremony, which will be broadcast live on Walt Disney's ABC on March 10th.
So, Ken gets an Oscar nomination, but not Barbie. No wonder many are upset. All right, as we close this edition of Global Lens, let's get you some news from Saudi Arabia. And this is something to cheer about, perhaps. Well, reports suggest Saudi Arabia is preparing to open its first alcohol store in the capital city of Riyadh. The store will, however, serve exclusively to the non-Muslim diplomats from other countries. In order to get access to alcohol, customers will have to register via a mobile app and then need to get a clearance code from the foreign ministry. There's also a monthly quota on the amount of liquor which can be bought by a person. The decision to serve alcohol can be seen as a milestone in the Islamic kingdom's efforts to open itself to business and tourism. Alcohol so far was banned in the ultra-Muslim country as drinking is forbidden in Islam. Saudi Arabia has strict laws against drinking alcohol which can be punishable by jail terms, fines, while the expatriates can also face deportation. But it looks like at least a part of it is about to change. All right, that's all we have for you on Global Lens tonight. If you have been, thanks for watching. Do join us again at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye.
जानना है तो देखिए